going. That means we're live. We're not really live. We record. So if you say something that you thought you're like, man, sound like a bumbling idiot, then we can cut it out before we actually air the episode, which is much nicer.
I like that.
Yeah. So, hey, welcome to the Fireside Tattoo Podcast, the official podcast of the Fireside Tattoo Network. I'm Jake. This is Jesse Smith. I've been trying to get him over here all weekend, but you're a busy man.
Yes.
Lots of tattoos. So you're out of Virginia, right?
Yes.
But you're working on one giant tattoo after another in Oregon. So
yeah.
you've got like large scale collectors across the country at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the weed industry has been supporting me well from the West Coast.
Right. Yeah. So I wanted to start off. I just happened to cut through when you were teaching at the educational that led up. I didn't mention we're at Evergreen, did we? Thanks to Evergreen Tattoo Invitational for having us out again this year. It's a lot of fun. So you were at the educational teaching a seminar the Wednesday and Thursday leading up to this event, and I heard just a slight bit as I was passing through getting some B-roll footage. And I thought it was interesting just a little bit that I heard because if for anyone who doesn't know you stylistically, you have a very illustrative, cartoonish kind of style, but the principles that you were talking about, your thumbnailing, I heard you mention if I'm going to draw an acorn, I'm going to look at a real acorn and kind of memorize the shape really quickly. So it's grounded in traditional drawing principles. Do you feel like a lot of people that embark on a style similar to yours just try a lot to steal tricks from people like you, or do you think that that's something that's easily overlooked when approaching a style that is not necessarily realism or meant to be believable?
Yeah, I mean, I think all artists kind of start off copying other artists. I mean, when I was younger, I would just copy everybody, and then as I started developing my own style, then I started trying to like find influences from nature and other things outside of artists. So I just think it's a natural progression. I don't think that I'm sure there's artists out there who are like copying pieces of my work, and then after a while you start saying, okay, I kind of understand what he's doing here. Let me see if I can grab a different inspiration to kind of take it to that next level. So I mean, there's lots of artists out there that are doing my style that are doing the same thing that I'm doing as well. So
yeah. Talk a little bit about your approach. I don't want you to give away your seminar, obviously, because people paid money, but your design approach, you've got a very unique kind of way of mark making, the way that you lay shapes out, really strong, clear light sources, really like exaggerated shapes in a lot of ways. How did that come about? What was your background coming up, and what's your process in the design?
Yeah, so I actually talked about this in my seminar where I'm a product of Saturday morning cartoons and Jim Henson movies and stuff like that. So all that was kind of like being digested by me visually when I was younger. And then when 1993 actually moved to Heidelberg, Germany, and that was where I was first exposed to graffiti, and that was pretty much where everything kind of took off from there. So there was an artist named Toast who was doing really crazy characters and stuff, and of course I was copying everything he was doing, and then it just, everything launched off of that part of my life, I would say.
How did you end up in Germany?
My father was in the military, so we would travel every 3 or 4 years to different places. So I lived in Germany, Italy, London. I lived all up and down the East Coast, and I lived in Colorado and Texas. So
yeah. So graffiti. So you were drawing cartoons to begin with, and graffiti brought what different elements did graffiti introduce to you that you weren't getting in just drawing cartoons?
So cartoons were mostly like flat and two-dimensional, whereas graffiti was more like three-dimensional, tweak perspectives, a lot of light source driven stuff. There's things with dual, triple, and quadruple light sources in the graffiti world. So I was doing a lot of that, and then in tattooing I tried to tame it back a little bit, and it's just been a constant ebb and flow, of tweaking it really, really far and then bringing it back so it's a little more digestible, and then tweaking it really far and bringing it back where it's digestible.
Yeah.
And I notice there's these times where I kind of get bored of kind of normal things, so then I just tweak it and twist it, and then it gets so far where it's not even like palatable to the average person. So then I kind of bring it back a little bit, but it's a different entity than it was before because I've stretch those outer limits. So.
Yeah. But it all seems like it's grounded in a lot of traditional drawing principles. With your shapes are very clear. You know, your light sources are very clear, and if you're using secondary and third light sources, there's still a hierarchy within those.
Yeah.
And things like that. So that all came from cartoons and graffiti, or that's something that did you go through any kind of traditional background as far as, do you ever, I don't know, sit and do figure nights, or do you draw still lifes, or do you try to do representational work as well, just as an exercise, or no?
Well, I did 5.5 years at college, so
Okay.
we were doing a lot of still lifes and a lot of figure drawing and stuff like that. But after school, I haven't done much of that. It's just been balls to the wall, like crazy cartoons, and just taking it as far as I can.
Yeah.
And I have an apprentice that's almost finishing up now, and I've got a lot of artists in my shop who do similar styles to me, and I always urge them to go out and learn from different artists, and then they go learn things and they bring it back to me, which is really good, because I don't have as much time as I used to have. If I did, I would go back to school in a heartbeat. I really love learning, and I'm bummed out that I'm so busy that I can't learn more, but essentially they'll come back and I'll be like, okay, what'd you learn? And they'll be like, I learned this, this, and this, and I'm like, oh, I haven't heard that before, and then I use that into my my arsenal. So
at the clip, because you've also, in addition to I know we have a mutual friend in Gabe Ripley, and you guys are working. He's told me that you run a pretty tight ship with your shop, so you're a lot of management and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're booked with tattooing. You're handling you took over the Richmond
Tattoo and Arts Festival,
right, as well. So you're super busy. Do you allow yourself or make time to continue to explore outside of that, or do you find that you've run with this style for so long, it's what people expect from you, so you are you able to introduce new elements regularly? Are you able to really get out and explore creatively, or do you find that you just do what you do because it's the bread and butter and it's what people expect from you, and you only have a certain amount of time allotted?
I will never ever be like that.
Really?
I can't. I feel so uncomfortable. I feel so lazy. I feel if I'm doing the same thing over and over, I would just quit. Like whenever I feel like I can't push it another level, I just take a break and focus on something else, or I go take a class, or I just try to do something totally different. Yeah. And I'm sure from an outside perspective, it probably looks like I'm doing the same shit over and over. But if I can't bring something new into every piece that I do, then it makes me feel very uncomfortable in my head. So I always have to be trying to do something new. A lot of people will say, hey, man, can you tattoo this piece you drew a while back? Or, can you tattoo your sticker design or something like that? And I'll never do it because I just don't want to do the same thing twice.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things when you're drawing. I might draw like the same eye on two characters, but I've changed the nose, or I changed the ears, or I changed the shape, or whatever. But I'm always changing something, And from the average person, they probably look at it like, oh, they all look the same, but there's always something that's changing at all times. Or there's a lot of times I draw on the skin, like when I was drawing yesterday, and I'm like, this just looks like everything I've drawn before. So I'm like, how can I take this to that next level? And then I try to figure out a way to do that. So,
and that can be a challenge for sure whenever you're in a setting like this, drawing something fresh on the skin, a limited amount of time. They're going to boot you out of here at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
You can only explore so far. So you really have to rely on your bank of knowledge, your principles, your art school background to be to trust your process enough to create something unique and dynamic and new in that short time period in this type of setting.
Right. Yeah. But the other thing too is I always try to remember why I'm doing this. I'm not doing it. I live within my means, so I don't have to make a lot of money. So I can. It's okay if it takes me longer to do something, or I don't feel like I have to do these things. I do them because I want to do them.
Yeah.
As soon as I feel like I have to, it just completely takes away the creativity in me. It's just like I got to bash out this tattoo to make a bunch of money to pay my bills or whatever. So I just don't have any bills really. My bills are just really low, and I just always trying to enjoy it. If you're not enjoying it, then I might as well be flipping burgers at Burger King.
Right. Yeah, I think that's super important. And we talk to so many high-level, high-paid tattooers that don't live within their means, that are always struggling. Always trying to, always under stress to produce something to make that next chunk of change. We see it a lot. It's crazy within an industry where there are so many highly paid, completely broke, uninsured people. It makes you scratch your head. Before I change gears, you do a lot of big soft fields of color in a lot of your work, and a lot of really smooth, buttery kind of blends. What was the learning curve like for that? Obviously you've seen that stuff heal because you were working on a 10-year-old sleeve the other day.
Right.
What do you take from watching? Because those were, when you first started doing that stuff, that was a big risk. You didn't see a whole lot of that, like stuff that's mixed down with a ton of white, these kind of really off teal, mint green blues and stuff that are peaches that you're doing these big fields of. We had no idea how that was going to hold up. What have you learned from that experience, and have you changed your approach by watching these things heal at age?
I've changed my approach substantially. Back in the days, I did use a lot of white. I don't use any white anymore at all. I feel like, actually Nick Baxter kind of said it in his book about how if you add white or you add black to any color, it ends up muting it down and it desaturates it. And the problem with desaturated colors is when you put a desaturated color in, it's only going to go worse over time or get worse over time. So you need to start kind of with your best foot forward and using more vibrant colors because they're going to hold up more. And this is like all with a foot in traditional thought process. They would use a lot, just red and black and green and black and yellow and black, and that's it. And they wouldn't do any like mixing in the cap. And I did a lot of mixing in the cap back in the days. Now I don't do as much mixing in the cap. And it's more like lay the black down and then lay the color over top of the black, and then fade that out into skin. And I've just, even like studying. Ink Master helped me out a ton because it was just like, you're really good at this one thing, but you suck at all these other things. So like I started studying those things more. I started studying black and gray application where it's like not full saturation. It's more of like a soft grazing technique. So I've been doing a lot of that, like where I'm essentially just doing kind of a pendulum effect and getting a real softness into the skin, and using skin as my white instead of actually putting white in there.
Okay.
And then I've been studying pigment a lot. So like I've been doing a lot of research with, Tramp's been helping me out by giving me a lot of information on what's in the ink and how it works and all that stuff. And then I've been taking that back and I've been doing some lightfast testing. Oh. So essentially I've been taking the inks and Eternal Ink's made up of 14 different colors. And those are the only colors that are in every color in the set. Okay. So what I've actually done is take those 14 colors and I'm light fasting those, doing a light fast test on those to see how much they hold up in the sun. And, I've done 3 years worth of experimenting on it. And thus far I've figured out that orange is just, there's no point using orange. Orange is shot. So the crazy thing is if you mix red and yellow, it holds up better than just doing orange.
Yeah, that's strange.
So I always just mix either red and yellow or I'll mix like a pink and yellow, and that's where I get my oranges
That's where all your oranges come from.
Yeah.
We've had this discussion because anyone that's been tattooing through the 90s and early 2000s, we've all seen the fugitive oranges. We've watched it happen to our work. Yeah. And I've had this same discussion with both Baxter and Guy Aitchison several times over the years, and both they still, even though a lot of the manufacturers are saying, no, we've really solved the problems with the orange. Neither of those guys trust it at all. They're like, I'll never buy another orange.
It's totally not true. My light fast tests are within the last 3 years. Okay. And I did the only one that actually held up, the oranges were Old Gold, but they're not making it anymore. Huh. But all the other ones I've done Fusion, I've done World Famous, all the oranges are shot. So, I don't know what the difference between Old Gold is and those guys. There's just so many variables involved that we haven't figured out yet. Right. And I've been trying to put a lot of time into trying to understand these. Yeah. I want my tattoos to hold up, and I've seen a lot of my old tattoos and they look horrible. You know, and it's not because they're not done traditionally or whatever. It's just that the inks aren't holding up as well as we thought they would.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. What do those lightfast tests look like? What do you actually do? What's the process?
So what you do is you basically take your pigment and you just stick it on a, either a piece of paper or like a piece of cardboard, and you make like a square. And then what I did is I laminated them, and then I took like a foil tape and I ran it over half of it, and then half of it's being exposed to sun and the other half isn't. Then you peel that off and you get to see the difference. Yeah, and then the other way I did it initially before that one was I just would make a blotch of ink, and then a year later I would take that same color and put it on top of it.
Okay.
So you could really see the difference in those. But
So
I've got photos and stuff of all this stuff.
yeah, I was going to ask if you had recorded this. That's super interesting. I mean, obviously you did it for your own benefit, but that's something that'd be of a huge benefit to all tattooers to see. Yeah,
once I get more solid, I think getting down to that 14 base color makes more sense, because I was doing all the colors initially until I realized there was only 14 colors. So now I'm doing those 14 colors, and then what you can do is, like, say orange is an issue, which we know, then any color that has orange in it, I just won't use. Because there's other colors that have orange in them, and over time, let's just say it's a muted down blue, and they're muting it down with orange, then over time, that orange is going to go away, and that blue is going to become maybe more vibrant or more blue, and then it's going to change your whole tattoo.
Right.
So being able to understand that will make it so you can create a tattoo that's going to hold up consistently over time.
Has Eternal made that? I haven't been on their site, but I think that they have their material safety sheets. Do they make that known to everyone what those 14 colors are if people wanted to research?
I don't think so. I've been dealing with
Tramp,
and to be honest, I don't really know if that's information Tramp wants me to put out there.
Sure.
He probably wouldn't be happy if I was talking about the oranges either. But
yeah.
They're aware. Everybody's aware of it. And my goal is to try to figure out a way to, give people a full spectrum of color with what we know and what we have.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm glad we dove into that a little bit, because that's something that's a question that we get fairly often is about oranges in particular, and how so many of the manufacturers are saying, like, no, our oranges are safe now, and it's but I'm like you. I've mixed my oranges for years now because I watched it happen. Talk for a second. I know you have to tattoo, so I don't want to keep you all day, but about Richmond Convention and how that transition ended up taking place. That was my first show, probably in the late 90s.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, the first one I ever went to.
Did you tattoo it?
Yeah.
Tattoo edit?
Yeah.
Dude, you see these pins right here? I actually give these pens out to anybody who actually worked the show back then. So
really?
I've got it. I'll give you one later.
Oh, awesome, dude.
But essentially, it's kind of like a ranking system, because a lot of times when people go to conventions, you've got the newest ink master, and everybody's like giving them all these accolades, but then you got somebody like, Lyle Tuttle sitting in the corner,
right?
And nobody knows who he is. So when you come to my convention, everybody can wear these pins, and whoever has like old pins, you're like, oh, that person's been around for a while holding it down.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. When we started doing this, I started realizing people like Megan Massacre, for example, she had worked the Richmond Convention, so she got one of these pins. So it wasn't like, hey, I'm just a TV person. I'm also been holding it down for a while.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's super cool. Yeah.
And we've got people at the convention like James Vaughn, who's been working it since day one. He's got we got gold, silver, and copper for all the Billy Easton era, and then there was 5 years where the guys who throw the Salt Lake City convention, CJ Starkey and Nate Drew. So we've got a pin for them as well, and then there's a pin for my era. So it's like you get a pin for each one.
Yeah.
And then we're going to start doing it online too. So you actually have a ranking online as well.
That's awesome. What a cool idea.
Yeah.
So how did that transition take place? What made you decide? Is this your first convention to run?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's crazy, man. Running a tattoo convention is insane. So anybody out there who thinks that promoters are just sitting there like raking in the dough off of everybody's booth fees, it's definitely not like that.
Not the case.
Yeah, but so basically what happened is, Richmond Convention was kind of like starting to take, Billy Easton ran it for 18 years. And then when Billy passed, he ended up handing it off. I mean, his daughter inherited it, and then she gave it to this guy named Nate Drew, who runs the Salt Lake City Convention. And then Nate Drew and CJ Starkey took it over, but they lived in Salt Lake City. So they're, pretty far away. So they couldn't like sit there and nurture it throughout the years. So it started taking a dive. And I didn't know Nate Drew that well, and I didn't know CJ Starkey, but everybody kept coming up to me, hey, man, we need to throw a convention in Richmond. We need to get a convention in Richmond that's awesome. So I actually started thinking about throwing a convention at Richmond. And what I did is I actually called Nate Drew and I said, Nate, you know, I didn't know Nate at all, but I was just like, hey man, I just want to let you know out of respect that I'm probably going to throw a tattoo convention in Richmond. He was like, man, I really wish, you know, you would come work with us instead. And I was like, well, shit, man, I'd much rather be a part of what they got going on than start a whole new one.
Sure.
So I started working with Nate and CJ, and then Nate and CJ decided that they didn't want to do it anymore. So they just threw it on my plate, and then they actually partnered me up with this other guy named Kenny Brown, who I'd never even met before.
He's a tattooer?
He's a tattooer, yeah, and he's got more footing in the traditional side than I do. You know, I'm more of a progressive artist. So it was pretty interesting because, you know, he's this big gnarly dude, big beard, tattooed head to toe, and obviously I'm the opposite, you know.
Yeah.
And so I go to meet him for the first time, and I'm like, man, this is going to be miserable like partnership. And him and I just hit the ground running.
Oh, really?
I was like, yeah, he's one of my favorite partners I've ever had. And it's a person I never, you know, it was the same thing with Ink Master. You end up getting forced to be around these people you would never be friends with ever. And now I'm friends with, you know, Mark Matthews, MMA fighter. I'm friends with Kate Cutta, gangster from Fayetteville, North Carolina. And it's like, you know, these are all my buddies now. But I wouldn't have hung out with them any other reason but because of Ink Master.
Yeah.
But
how many years have you done it now? Was last year your first, second? Richmond, how long?
3 years we've done it, and we're going on our fourth this year.
Going on your fourth.
Yep.
Okay, all right. So what? We talk because we travel and do this a lot. We end up talking to the promoters pretty regularly. What? Anything in particular surprise you? Something you weren't expecting about running a convention? That hard lessons learned on the front end, or?
I mean, it's just there's so many things that go on the back end that you just don't think about, and you know we're pouring our heart and soul into it, and you know we have yet to profit off of this convention. So to put so much love and energy into something and get zero financial return is really difficult to like digest that. It's like, man, I could have tattooed, you know, for a month and made more in that amount of made ton more in that amount of time. So but you know, seeing the value in like it's all a symbiotic relationship. You throw a convention and then your tattoo shop is sponsoring it and getting a promotion via that, and then, you know, people come to your tattoo shop and get tattooed. So and I've got a couple other companies that are involved in it as well. So everything kind of works together. So although this particular avenue maybe isn't making money, it's kind of helping my other companies make money.
Yeah.
So
that's what we found. We've been doing this show for 6 years with we've never sold sponsorships. We have created a few digital products here and there that are based off of what people have asked for, but nothing compared to what we spend traveling to do the actual show. But you're exactly right. You step back and you're like, well, if it's promoted, obviously me personally as a tattooer, so and then the relationships that have been formed, and it probably, you know, the domino effect from that, I probably can't even measure at this point 6 years in. It's like, well, what is this? What is this little podcast actually done over those? You know, like you look at the balance sheets and it doesn't make any sense at all, but they don't paint really a very thorough picture.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, podcasts are great because you're sitting there and everybody who's watching, they're constantly they know you now. You know, you may not know them, but they know your personality. They're watching you interact with other people. So it's good. Yeah,
absolutely. Same dynamic. Well, before you go, I'm sure you get this question a lot. You mentioned the guy that you're working with, I forget his name, being big, you know, heavily tattooed, and you're not very tattooed at all. Any particular reason for that?
Yeah, when I first started tattooing, I didn't actually start tattooing because I was into tattoos. I started tattooing because I really loved art, and this was just a way to do art on people. And I was just always super humbled by the fact that somebody would want my artwork on them for the rest of their lives. So I started tattooing, and I wasn't tattooed for the first couple of years that I was tattooing, and of course I got a lot of flack for it. But then as I started like kind of getting into tattooing and started seeing other tattoo artists out there who I felt like inspired me artistically, I started reaching out to a couple of them. And I've actually tried to get tattooed by 4 different tattoo artists, and I don't want to name their names, but I've tried to get tattooed by 4 pretty well-named tattoo artists, and it's just like pulling teeth trying to get them to follow through on what they're trying to do. I mean, there's one artist I tried to get tattooed by twice, and I was like, hey, man, I want to get tattooed by. He's like, oh, yeah, throw some sketches together and send them my way. And I'm like, I don't really want to draw my own tattoo, but I want you to do it, but I'll throw some sketches. So I throw some sketches, I give it to him, and then never hear back. And then there's another one where I'm like talking to him on email, everything's going good, and as soon as I start talking about tattoos, he just stops
it.
talking, you know, and then
Isn't that a strange? It's very common.
Yeah.
It's so odd. So as someone that runs a shop, and obviously as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and you're trying to, I don't know, how many artists are in your shop?
We got 9 and then 10
Okay.
including me.
10 including you. And skill, I mean, as far as not skill, but they run the gamut as far as how long they've been tattooing, their skill sets, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you find that? Do you have to deal with that in your own shop? I mean, do you have people that are just like not responding to customers and things like that?
Yeah, and so that's been a big struggle too. Like I'm going against the grain as I always do on everything, but I'm trying to get my shop more towards employee status, because the fact of the matter is a lot of these tattoo shops are essentially treating their tattoo artists like employees, but they're not giving them health benefits and all that stuff. So I'm trying to move in that direction, because the fact of the matter is I have a lot of problems giving up the control of the customer service, because the customer service is something that 90% of the tattoo world sucks at. So, so essentially, like, that's the biggest problem I have with my artists. It's like, hey, answer your emails, show up to your appointments on time. These types of things are, to me, it's just, a standard of a basic standard.
Right.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
But yeah, that's been a big struggle with me, is just trying to get that customer service and the customer experience to be consistent every time.
From artist to artist. And so up to now you've worked with them as subcontractors, and you're trying to make that transition in an effort to just have more control over that entire process?
Not so much to have control over the process. The thing is like, what I've been learning lately is what we've been doing the same thing the whole time, where we're essentially like, the people come through the front door, the shop help like checks them in, does all that. If you do that legally, you're essentially the people that work in your shop are employees legally. So if you get caught by the IRS comes in and says, well, they go down their checklist. If you're doing all these things, then you have employees in your tattoo shop and you're not paying payroll tax and all that stuff. They're just going to back charge you for everything.
Yeah.
So really what I'm not doing it to have more control over my artists, because I already have that for the most part. It's like everything, the system's running the way it is. I expect people to be there on time and spend the day there to finish up everything they need to finish up. But it's more to try to be legit with the government and the IRS and all that stuff. And it's just me. I've got a lot of businesses running, and if for whatever reason I get caught cutting corners here or there, then I can lose it all. So I try to keep everything super legit, and I know that's like counterintuitive for the tattoo world, but it's just not the type of game I'm trying to run. And I tell every artist in my shop, I'm like, look, there's all the shops in the world are ran, most of the shops in the world are ran this way. If you're not happy with the way I run my shop, you're welcome to work there. I'd rather you be happy working there than unhappy working for me.
Sure.
But I like to think that with some of that structure, I counterbalance it with actually giving a shit about my artists. Anytime they need help, I'm there for them. And, we keep them fed. Everybody who doesn't have clientele who comes to my shop is usually booked up just like that, so.
Yeah. That is a counterintuitive idea to tattooing, and it's funny. We did a series at Space City. It's in Huntsville, Alabama. We just were there last week, and we were talking to, I had 2 interviews in a row that used the term pirate mentality. They didn't know each other, but they both said, like, we're just a bunch of pirates. It's like, you're still trying to be pirates in an industry that really is not conducive to that anymore.
It's different.
If you're asking for $1,500 a day, you probably are going to have to stop with the cash only.
Right.
At some point, it's got to go away.
Right.
And
and the world's changing, and not just the industry, but the world's changing. Everything's getting a lot more digital. There's a lot more trails of information, and then even the government and IRS are really picking up on the fact that we're a pretty lucrative industry, so they're starting to tap in. I got a buddy of mine just got busted for $30,000 in back taxes because of the way he ran his paperwork. Now he's going legit, and he was a pirate shop as well. And so what I really been trying to I want to create a seminar about this, about the value of a pirate tattoo shop versus the value of a what would it be called, more like a what are those ones, like carnival ships or whatever, the value, it's like there's always this kind of balance between running a pirate one where people can have fun, do whatever the heck they want, but having enough structure where you're not negatively affecting the potential of the business and the customer experience. Is really what it comes down to. And so, you know, there's these shops out there that you know, pretty much are ran like frat houses. And it's like, hey, man, that would be fun for me to work when I'm younger, but as I'm getting older and I want to build a foundation for myself for the future and be able to, like, have 401ks and all these things. And, you know, attracting more families, you know, like the artists who have families, because then it's not about you anymore.
Right.
So, you know, it's just like anything. If you buy something from Target and you don't like it, you take it back, no questions asked. If the person at the cash register, you know, does something shitty to you, you talk to corporate, they take care of it. If you go to a mom and pop shop, I mean, I bought a pillow at a chiropractor the other day, and I tried to take it back, and they're like, yeah, we don't take this back. And I'm like, what? You know what I mean? Like, you just sold this shitty fucking pillow to me, and now you're not going to take it back. So, you know, there's a give and take on both sides. And a lot of those, like, those pirate shops don't have as much clientele anymore.
No, they really don't. I think that's what really a lot of the pirate mentality tattooers are overlooking, is that we don't control the clientele like we used to. The clientele really calls the shots these days because, they're a lot more educated because of you know, TV shows or whatever else, and they expect, with the price point these days, I think they expect a more personalized boutique type of experience. They don't expect to be barked at when they walk into a shop or talked down to or any of that. And I think you're exactly right. You see more and more of these shops closing up or just struggling to get by, lowering rates.
And there's a lot more accountability these days. If you tell somebody to fuck off, they go write a Google review. And those Google reviews fuck you up, man. Like, if you don't have a good standard online, people are looking, hey, which one has the best Google reviews? This one right here, they told me to fuck off. I'm not going to that shop, you know? So I enjoy back in the days working for those, like, pirate shops, but I think there needs to be a balance between the two. You know, you don't have to be, like, super corporate where you're so, like, structured and cold that you can't, like, have fun. But, you know, if you don't have any structure, you got people snorting lines off the fucking toilet seat, you know, in between tattoos or something. It's like, you know, it's not a good feel for a longevity of a tattoo shop. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I know you have to tattoo. Do you have dates for Richmond this upcoming?
Yeah, it's the 12th through the 15th, I believe. And then we're also doing the Richmond Tattoo and Arts Academy. Where we're gonna have. So last year I introduced the Richmond Tattoo and Arts Academy. It's basically we had 6 presenters presenting for about 40 minutes apiece. We had 4 tattoo artists. We had, like, Gia Rose, Phil Garcia, Dave Koenig, Jose Perez. So we had those guys presenting. And then we also had 2, we had a girl from Pixar. She was presenting. And then we also had a concept artist from LA. He was presenting.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
and that leads up. Is it done like this where it leads up to the actual event, or how's it structured?
So last year we did it on the Monday following the convention. This year we're actually going to do the Thursday and the Monday. And so on the Thursday it's going to be more tattoo centric. So I'm going to have 4 tattoo artists presenting. And then on the Monday we're going to have only, like, concept artists, illustrators, and painters. So essentially you can either get each one individually, or you can do a package deal and do both of them. But it's just kind of, I don't know. I've always wanted to do this, and you know, it's you know, of course, Gabe was doing it for a long time, and then now you've got Explorer and you've got Black Anchor Academy. So you know, it's just, and you know, Evergreen Invitational and stuff like that. To me, it's just part. You know, you go to a comic book convention or whatever, they've got panels and all that stuff. All the big conventions, there's always some sort of, like, you know, learning,
some
educational element to it. So, and I've always wanted to do it on the time before or after, because I would go to a convention like here. You know, I would have loved to take James Kern's seminar, but I can't because I'm already booked up. So being out, if it was on Monday or Thursday, then I get to take it. So
and I do see it going more that way, and it makes a lot of sense. And I love to see that, you know, that an industry that was so secretive for so long that this is just becoming ingrained in what we do. The information sharing has become such a big part of it. So did I miss the actual dates? What did you say they are?
It's the 12th through the 15th is the convention dates, and I think on the 11th and the 16th is when the academy is going to happen.
Gotcha. Okay.
So.
And if people how often are you traveling? I mean, you traveled here, I'm guessing mainly to teach the educational, and then just ended up tattooing. So are you doing? You're not tattooing at a lot of conventions these days, or are you?
I mean, I do. So my thing now is I go to conventions specifically to see a new space. So if I've never been there before, I got this app on my phone. It's called Ben, BEEN.
Yeah.
And essentially anytime I go a place, you can kind of log it in there.
Yeah.
And it shows you everywhere you've been in the world and tells you what percentage of the world you've seen.
Oh.
And so if I get invited to a place that I've never been before, so like, I've never been to Oregon. So I was invited to Oregon. I was like, oh man, I'll do it. So now I can lock it in on there. Now I've seen 56% of America.
That's awesome.
So it's
download that. That's a great idea.
It's pretty cool. And then it tells you, like, I think I've seen like 13% of the world, something like that. And obviously it's only but so accurate. Like, if I go to China, it gives me like all of China.
Right.
If I go to Australia, it gives me all of Australia. Same thing with Canada.
Gotcha.
But then in the U.S., you get like little pieces.
Yeah.
But it's really cool. So my whole thing now is I'm traveling. For the main reason I'm traveling to conventions is because I want to see that. So we came here to go see the redwoods as well, and then go see Crater Lake. So I'm excited about that.
How long are you here? When do you?
2 weeks, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We try to spend about 2 weeks everywhere, so we can actually see and enjoy this space. Because I mean, I'll be here 5 days for the convention, so 2 weeks gives me about an extra week of traveling.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go down and work at 26 Swords for a day.
Okay. Yeah, I was down there last year, but before it was 26 Swords, I was down there and did a show with Jeff, and that's a really beautiful shop. So it's an interesting little town. Have you been there yet?
There, no.
Yeah, it looks like Mayberry, and then I was like Andy Griffith's show Mayberry, like a small town. Then I sit down and start talking to Jeff, and he's like, "Oh man, the meth is crazy in this town." Like, really? I thought I was going to see like little kids playing with their dogs and kicking a ball down the street, but it doesn't. So
that's West Coast, man. Every time I come out to the West Coast, I'm either hanging out with people that used to be meth heads, their mom used to be meth heads, their neighbors are meth heads. Like, it seems like that shit's rampant out here.
Yeah,
man.
It seems like it. It's crazy. It really is. So if people want to get tattooed, is it still fairly easy? Are you booking crazy far in advance, or with these?
No, I only book 2 months in advance always, and I do kind of like a timeshare situation. So being that I'm doing a lot of larger projects, essentially I say I've got X amount of days per month. And you can essentially rent one of those days, not rent, but pay for one of those days. So like, you might get the first Monday of every month. Okay. But I won't take on a big project unless you commit to that first Monday of every month. Oh. And then as soon as that project's done, that opens up that Monday, and then I go onto my waiting list, and then I just hit. But I don't really have a waiting list either. It's more of like, I kind of have one, but it's more of like, I used to have there was a time where I had like 3,000 people on a waiting list. And then I would run through, when I'm ready to take on a new project, I'd run through that waiting list, and I'd have to get through like 150 people just to find one person, because all the other people had either bought a house or, decided not to get tattooed anymore or died or whatever, who knows? It's just been so long. I mean, I had people who were waiting around for like 9 years before I hit them up. So I just nix that, and then I just kind of like, when I'm ready to take on a new project, I just kind of run through some of the more recent people. So and then conventions are a lot, usually a little easier to get in. Right.
So if you just real quick, so if you start a new piece and you're booking too much, you book them the first Monday of the month, and then whenever the next 2 month block comes up, if that project's still going, you just continue those Mondays.
Oh no, they get Mondays.
They get it as long as you think it's going to take.
So they own that Monday. So like, let's say I start a back piece and I finish that back piece, they can keep on going if they want to get a sleeve or whatever. Okay. They own that Monday. That Monday is their Monday. Okay. Yeah, and then if they are not consistent, like say they start rescheduling and missing appointments, then I just boot them and then give somebody else that Monday.
That's a really interesting approach. I've never thought of that, but it is almost like a timeshare. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and that way you're giving 100% attention. I might have only 8 to 10 clients that I'm working on at one time, but they're getting all of my attention. Versus like if I've got 50 clients going and weird stuff's happening, I just always want to make sure that I'm giving my clients 110% of my attention. Yeah. And then when you've got too many clients, it's like, oh, where was I on this again? How long has it been? Yeah. So I make them commit to like at least once a month. But now I'm starting to get to the point I'm doing more of like what Guy Atchison does, where it's like, if you want to get a big project, I need 3 days in a row, and then another 3 days in a row, and let's just like get in and get out, get this project over with, so it's not like
dragging on.
Yeah, some of these back pieces have taken me like 3 or 4 years to finish, and it's just, it's not because of me. Well, I mean, it's partially because of me, because I'm taking a long time to do it, but like Patrick we were talking about earlier. I mean, that was 2 years, and he was pretty motivated. But still, if we had done 3 days in a row, and then another 3 days in a row, and just get it done.
Yeah. So. And then stylistically, like you were mentioning earlier, you're always trying to push yourself in new directions. And if you're working on a piece that you had laid out 3 years ago, you've probably made some transitions, in your own style that you're.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the pieces when I finish them, I'm over it.
Yeah.
And I just, I'm not even excited to like put it out there because I'm like, this is way different than what I was doing back then.
Yeah, and that's tough when you've got so much time invested. So,
yeah.
Well, man, I know I'm sure we ran over the time I told you it would take.
Good.
But I really appreciate you taking the time. Yeah.
Easy to talk to you, man.
Man, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for supporting what we do. Check out Jesse Smith. I'm sure you know Jesse Smith Tattoos is your Instagram, or
Jesse Smith Tattoos across the board. Yep.
Across the board. So, thank you guys. We'll see you next time.
See ya.